You found it. You've got the golden ticket to get in behind the bar and hang out with other nerds. Yes, on the Isobar, the highs and lows of meteorology, our regional weather podcast with myself, Rob Haswell, chief meteorologist in Milwaukee, Emily Walls down the road, chief meteorologist in Chicago, and Rich Luderman over in Detroit, chief meteorologist for Fox there. Guys, great
I've
to
got a
see you
golden
again.
ticket. I've got a golden chance to make my way. That's one of my favorite movies. That's a Luderman family favorite.
There you go. It's got to be one of the best in the world too. Of course, the Milwaukee connection there with Gene Wilder, the original, right? And I'm gonna guess, Rich, that's not the first time you've performed a musical.
No, I have driven my children to tears singing them the songs of their youth, including Willy Wonka. That is an all-time classic in the Luderman household.
There you go, the golden ticket. Well, I'm glad we were able to give a golden ticket to all of our listeners and watchers out there in podcast land, as they say, or at least as I say. We're going to start off on what will be a painful note for Rich and for I, as football season has ended in Detroit and here in Wisconsin for the Packers. Of course, for Packers fans, it was a rough way to end, losing to the arch rival Bears. The upside for us weather nerds was that it was a very weather fun game. There was so much going on, Emily.
Yeah, lots going on. I can tell you right now, there's an energy in the city of Chicago right now that I have never experienced yet. It's been very, very fun to see. But yes, with the game against the Packers, we had on and off snow, and everyone was really gearing up for the week leading up to that game, thinking like, okay, we might have a snow game here. And, the forecast, it molded and evolved. And of course, it wasn't that snowy of a game, but we still had some pretty heavy snow bursts prior to that game starting, a couple during the game. But as far as accumulation was concerned, we really didn't see a ton. But regardless, fans were pumped that we had at least the chance of snow in the forecast, and they were seeing those snowflakes as they were entering into Soldier Field. And of course, for Chicago and for the Bears, things played out. And on the home turf, the snow caused no issues whatsoever.
Yeah, no doubt. And we had some great pictures of our sports team down there, covered in snow with the pregame. And then, of course, like you said, it kind of all gone. But as a Packers fan, I gotta say, the wind played a part of it as well. I mean, somebody up there with Mother Nature is a Bears fan, because that kick that just took a hard left. I mean, something in the weather world was on your side.
Yeah, something on the weather world, but I still think that, if I could take the credit, I would. I think that would go a long way for my career. But no, I can't take the credit. But yes, weather was very much a factor, I think, in specifically that play. But also, I think just the energy, people are pumped. And looking forward to the game against the Rams, we could have some things going for us this coming weekend as well, because from what I was doing a little bit of research, doing a little bit of reading, it looks like the coldest game that the Rams have played so far this season was right around 43 degrees. And on Sunday, we're going to be in the teens for the game against the Rams. So maybe, the cold could have an impact on the LA folks there. But for the Bears, I think, we've been there, we've done that. We're going to have wind chill temperatures pretty close to zero. And we've already had a game where wind chills were sub-zero. So I hope we'll come out on top.
Yes, maybe after all these decades, things are finally going the Bears' way. Because
Yes.
it's been
What's interesting to both of you? I'm an old school football guy. Going back like to the Rose Bowl, for example, when it was Big Ten playing, West Coast team, Pac-10. Mm-hmm. And, the Big Ten always had a tough time going to the Rose Bowl and beating a West Coast team. Well, now an LA team is coming to the Great Lakes in January. And let's see how it plays out. There is an advantage to these cold weather cities. And I'm rooting for Chicago. I'm all in. I was watching that Green Bay game with the Bears. And, at first, as you know, it wasn't a great game because Green Bay was on top pretty handily. And then I kept clicking, and then I clicked back, and all of a sudden it was a lot closer. And then by the end, I got emotionally involved. And so, Emily, I was thinking of you as the Bears held on and won a great, great game. But I think Great Lakes weather and Great Lakes grit is going to handle the Rams. There you go.
That's
I
an
think
interesting
so too.
take. Yeah, that's an interesting take that the weather here might actually play a pretty big part. I mean, obviously it played a part in the Bears-Packers game for sure. There are a lot of Bears fans in Wisconsin. Obviously, they're outnumbered by the Packers fans, but still, a lot of folks, even in my viewing area, were pretty happy with the outcome after, suffering for a long time. But Rich, of course, the Lions would have been an indoor game.
Yeah, I mean, they got eliminated a few weeks ago, and
Sure.
these last 2 years for Lions fans have been very good, but this year they fell short. And like in basketball and football, I'm a Big Ten guy.
Okay.
So when my team is out, I'm rooting for the Big Ten. Now that the Lions are out, I'm rooting for a Great Lakes team. I'm rooting for the Bears. Go Bears!
All right, there you go. You heard it. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I still like to get paid, so I'm gonna not endorse anybody right now.
We'll send you a
Not with
cheese
that, but I'd
grater
like
because
for
I
my
think those have been
house to
flying
still
off
be
the shelf.
standing. It was a fascinating game to watch, though. So there you go. Congrats to an incredible game. All right, from there we move on because, yes, there was snow. Then there was rain. Previous to the game, though, days earlier, quite a bit of rain. We had, I heard, 1 day rainfall here in the Milwaukee area. I know you had massive rainfall down in Chicago, Emily.
We did. So not only did we set a daily record rainfall for the event that occurred on the 8th, but that actually is going in the books as the third rainiest, so the third wettest January day that we've ever seen in Chicago. So, it was one of those things. If you think back to a few weeks ago, we were talking about the Climate Prediction Center and how we were favored to see above average precipitation. And so far, this month is shaping up accordingly, at least here in the Chicago area. So very wet so far. We had a little bit of a break in the last several days, but looking forward, it looks like we could kind of pick things back up, but more on a winter tone. But yes, we had a very, very rainy day back on the 8th. And then followed on the 9th, we actually set a record high temperature with a temperature of 60. So the weather so far this month it's been a little wacky. We've
Yeah.
certainly had a mild start to January here in the Chicagoland area, but things are changing.
That is true. Yeah, we're going to get to the longer range forecast and some of the climate prediction outlooks in just a little bit. How have things been in the last couple of weeks over in Detroit, Rich?
Well, I have a story for you, Rob, and Emily, you'll
Okay.
appreciate this. So, as you know, it's been rather dry, going back into the fall. It's been pretty dry here in this part of Michigan. So, for the last 2 months, my sump pump that's in my basement has been dry. I mean, there's literally no water in it when I look down into it. But over the last 10 days, the water levels have been coming back up within the sump. And it came up to the level where the sump normally kicks on, except it
Uh-oh.
did not kick on. So I
Oh,
had to call the plumber, and it's been resolved. But the water kept getting higher and higher in the
oh,
sump
geez.
with the snow and some of the rain we've had. We have not had heavy rain in the last 10 days, but we've had some. But anyway, my sump was almost to the top. The plumber shows up, does some swapping, works his plumbing magic, and
Yeah.
it all gets flushed out. And this is what I'm saying right now.
Yeah.
It's always
Yeah.
something. Being a homeowner, it's always something. And
Yes.
there
Well, you're a
that
very
that that
responsible homeowner.
well, the last thing I need or want is water in the basement. That's bad, in many levels. So
Yeah.
it got handled. But it's interesting how dry my sump was for probably about 7 weeks, and then in the last 10 days, it
Hmm.
began to fill up.
Yeah, kind of fascinating considering that, just a few miles or a few hours travel farther to the west, and Emily and I are sitting here, getting soaked and getting significant snowfalls
Fascinating.
and a lot of wintry mess as well. Now, from there, of course, we turn to the return of the snow because we did get that big rain and we had that record temperature. We did that here in Milwaukee as well. But then, just recently we did get some snow back in the area and we did get some lake effect up in the UP. Did any of that lake effect make it down the Detroit way or into your viewing area,
It
Rich?
did not. I mean, we saw some of the impressive totals up around Marquette and
Yeah.
Newberry and close to Sault Ste. Marie. Impressive totals up there. Now we got some nickels and dimes. I mean, that's what we call it. Maybe a one, maybe a two. But as of today, there is no snow on the ground. I mean, it's all been either melted or the sun came out in the last couple of days. So, when the sun does come out in January here in Detroit and in the Great Lakes,
Hmm.
Milwaukee, Green Bay. Chicago. It's a glorious thing when the sun comes out in January.
Yes.
I mean, it's glorious. So we've had some sun the last couple of days.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference for sure. It makes life in the winter here in the Great Lakes a little bit better on a blue sky, sunshiny day. Lake effect obviously in the forecast again as we go through the near future here, and it's obviously a big part of life in the Great Lakes would be the Great Lakes. The levels of the Great Lakes and the ice level right now is very fascinating to me. I went back to check it out because I know Richie brought it back up last time we chatted a couple weeks ago. So I dug in a little bit, looked at some of the charts and some of the data there, and it's fascinating to see how the ice cover on the Great Lakes, all three that kind of are in our region, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, but particularly Michigan and Huron, were above average for the yearly averages for quite a bit early on in the season. And then they've absolutely plunged. The ice coverage has really dropped, particularly in Lake Michigan. Have you seen evidence of that down your way in Chicago, Emily?
Yeah, definitely. So if you think back to December, we had the cold snap for the first half of the month, and that's when we saw a lot of this ice really beginning to develop on the Great Lakes. And it took a little while for it to form on the Chicago lakefront, but we definitely had a couple weeks where we had a very, very thin layer of ice, especially in our harbors and things like that. But nothing out there now, not at all. I was actually out at the lakefront just a few days ago, and I mean, it was chilly, but it doesn't look like winter at all. We don't have snow on the ground right now, and there's no ice on our lakefront. So it's very different than what it was looking like even just a few weeks ago. So that warm spell that we've had over the last few weeks, it's made a huge difference on the little bit of ice that we were actually seeing out on Lake Michigan, southern Lake Michigan.
Yeah, I was going to say southern, even like the mid lake is, there's portions of it that are pretty much ice free, and there's very little shoreline ice of note for it being, mid to late January at this point. You go up, Green Bay, not the city, but the actual Bay of Green Bay along the Door County Peninsula there. That's about the only spot you're about to get, 80, 90% ice coverage. And, that's a big problem for a lot of folks here in Wisconsin and probably, across the lake in Michigan as well, looking for those winter sports that are ice related. Rich, Lake Huron, pretty much same story.
Yeah, not a whole lot. Now, Saginaw Bay is quite shallow, so there is ice in Saginaw Bay, and then Lake St. Clair has some ice. And then the west end of Lake Erie, also very shallow. So there is some ice, but I saw the charts you saw, Rob. We got off to a thick start in terms of ice, and now we've fallen below average levels for the middle part of January. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks because it's going to get cold and stay cold for the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm sure things are going to firm up once again. Now, I have a question along these lines. Have either one of you ever done like the polar plunge thing?
Yes.
And you have?
Yes. I did that for several years when I was in Michigan, but it was always on a smaller inland lake. To where they had to actually cut through the ice, and then you go into the center of the lake and you jump in. So, done it. It's an experience. It's for a wonderful cause, and that's why people do it. But my goodness, it was painful. It was painful. It felt like pins and needles in my skin.
My question is there video?
There's video, but there are some swear words that.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, we're only on a digital platform. I think we can get away with that. No,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
I think there were some colorful choices of my words when I resurfaced after jumping in.
I would imagine. And that's a very different experience for a polar plunge because, I'm assuming you didn't touch bottom or, is it tough getting out?
So the way that they would do it at the lake, I used to do it it was called Clark Lake in Michigan, and they would put a ladder in. There was rescue teams all there, and you would essentially have a place in the ice where about 3 or 4 people could jump at a time, but then everybody had their own ladder. So you weren't stuck waiting to get out, but you could touch. They did it in an area, it's a shallow lake. They did it in an area where I kind of jumped in, and I was about shoulder height. And then they had a more shallow-ish area for younger people or shorter people that were doing it as well.
Yeah, I've never done an official polar plunge. I may have told this story on the show before, but the closest I came, and what prevents me from repeating the experience, happened when I was working for the Weather Channel in Canada. And I was covering the International Boat Show in Toronto. And they had built an indoor demo lake, essentially, huge area that they could demo their little sea-doos and their water skis and that kind of stuff. And of course, being the intrepid reporter, always looking for a fun angle on a story, I thought it'd be funny to do my stand-up with me falling in the water. Nobody at the show mentioned that they had filled said man-made lake from Lake Ontario in the middle of January. So it was so cold. My every muscle contracted immediately. I was sore for weeks. So since then, no, I have not volunteered for any polar plunges. And I think if I did, Emily, I would avoid the kind that you did. The one that is the biggest here in Milwaukee is like kind of a run in, dunk your head, run back out situation. So you can kind of control how deep you go, what qualifies as a plunge to you, and then you get right back out and get some blankets on you. I'm assuming you've done it then, Rich, if you brought it up.
No. I mean, they do a lot of events, in the Detroit River at Belle Isle. I mean, that's a thing that's done here. But no, the older I get, Rob, the less I like cold water. And I know it's for a good cause, Emily. You got the right attitude. But I did go swimming in Lake Superior twice in August, and that was plenty cold. I mean, up at Whitefish Point when my kids were small. So we were there, we swam, we did it, we talk about it, but the cold water is not for me at this point.
Yeah, I learned some
pretty cold even in the summer. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I learned some very key things year after year of doing that polar plunge, though. You're stuck standing outside for a while before you jump in. So you want to dress warm, right? Well, I didn't think it through the first year, and I was actually wearing like a pair of leggings. You cannot get those clothes off fast enough when you get out of the water. So now it makes sense why so many people actually do it in bathing suits, and because you don't want those clothes on you longer than they need to be. But that was the only thing, my little lesson learned. So if you do end up doing the polar plunge, less is more.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
I will bear that in mind, but there's still going to have to be enough.
Yes. Make sure there's enough.
Less is more to a point.
Yes.
All right. So to pivot back to the more serious topic here with regard to ice, and we kind of mentioned it off the top about the safety, and there is some concern with the fluctuation in temperatures that we've had, even for inland lakes. Rich, lately in Detroit, when I was looking things up, a lot of ice rescues.
Yes. Snowmobiles going in the drink, thankfully, there were, successful rescues in these last 7, 8, 9 days. We say it all the time. We say it, to our audience here in Detroit. The whole concept is dangerous. There are people that get out there on the ice with the ice fishing and with the snowmobiles, but I don't know. Is it a chance that you want to take or need to take? It's very dangerous, and there have been some rescues here, and that just reiterates that even when it looks right and it is very cold out, there is no such thing as completely safe ice.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like you said, there is no such thing as perfectly safe ice. Even if you've measured it and measured it again, there still may be some problems with some pockets or air pockets or whatever. And it's interesting that you point out, like, is it worth it? I did not grow up ice fishing. I've tried it once and it was instantly not for me. But I did grow up snowmobiling and pond hockey and all that kind of stuff. So, my inner Canadian here, but had battles with that because it's part of culture growing up in northern Wisconsin, northern Michigan in particular, getting out there on the lake when it's frozen and taking advantage of that. But, with age and being a little less of a daredevil and devil may care kind of person, you do have to be very, very careful. And you're right. Is this worth it? Is this skate today on this pond going to be worth it?
Yeah, I grew up snowmobiling, and I have two older brothers, so they're very daring. I can recall several times knowing somebody who sunk a machine on Black River, because you want to pond hop a little bit, right? You see a little bit of open water, and they'll hit it and see if they can make it, and not everyone always makes it. So now in my older age, I would never be on the back of a snowmobile doing those things. But you're right, Rob. It's kind of like the culture, right? When you
Yeah.
grow up doing it and you see everybody else doing it, if your dads are doing it, your uncles, you don't really stop and realize the danger associated with it so much. Now that I am older and I have my own kids, I would never be going over open water, especially after the polar plunge that I know what it feels like.
Yeah, that's right. You know the pain.
Yeah.
And to be fair, things have just changed. We've talked about this on the show before. Our climate is different than it
Hmm.
was 30, 40, 50 years ago when the culture of ice fishing and pond hockey and snowmobiling across water had,
Hmm.
evolved. And when it got, into our DNA. Not saying you shouldn't get out there and enjoy it. I think you should. I just think you have to be very safe about it and be very, very particular with all of your safety precautions, right? Ice fishermen, make sure you've got those ice picks, the snowmobilers, stay away from the
Yep.
open patches. And the pond hockey players, pick a pond that's, knee deep even in the summer. So if you go through, it's just some cold shinny. That's all you got going
Yeah,
on.
that's right.
All right, let's pivot. Speaking of cold and dry, or will it be cold and wet? The trends, of course, continue to update. Our 8 to 14 day temperature trend kind of keeps us a little bit on the wetter side, which, Emily and I don't need, but Rich, maybe it's welcome over by
Mhm.
you now that the sump pump's fixed.
Well, our heavier snowfalls here in Detroit come from the southern systems, the ones that come out of Texas and Oklahoma and then swing up into Ohio or the Ohio River Valley. And, looking at some of the 10, 12-day models, there's not a lot of that activity coming. There's a big trough here in the Great Lakes. So, we'll get some more nickels and dimes, I suspect, in terms of minor snowfall, which can in and of itself be a pain with driving and tricky driving conditions. But I don't see any big storms coming. But now, as you both know, and our viewers, that can change pretty quickly. You can
Oh, for
get
sure.
a model to pick up on something for next week, and then all of a sudden that becomes the main storm. But I would say let's wait it out and see what happens. But I've been telling people here in the building, we're like 7 weeks to March, so we're there, we're getting there. We're 7 weeks to March.
We're getting
The
closer. We're
optimism.
getting close. A couple minutes of extra daylight a week or whatever. You seeing anything in the longer trends down your way, Emily?
For us, really, it's just going to be looking forward to all those Clipper systems. So we
Yeah.
have basically a Clipper Express that we're going to be on here for the next couple of weeks. So above average precipitation is expected. Of course, it really depends on the exact track of those Clippers and where they go to see who's going to get it, whether it's going to be you up in Milwaukee or whether it's going to be, us a little bit farther to the south in Chicago and Detroit area. But it does appear like we're going to be seeing above average precipitation. We've already had a very wet month so far. But I think with it being much colder, now we're kind of turning the page over to snow. So it's going to be a snowier precipitation than what we've had, which, it's January. We can do it. We'll be excited about it.
Right. And we're turning the corner, as Rich pointed out. And as Rich was saying, some of the snowier events typically are the systems that come farther from the south or the
Hmm.
southwest. I don't mind a parade of clipper systems. They're pretty quick. They're usually
Yep.
very light with snowfalls, nickels and dimes. Might have to
Hmm.
borrow that one, Rich. I like it. But yeah, those are much more manageable events for the near future, even though they will probably still end up putting us slightly above for that 8 to 14 day trend. Now, the seasonal trend that gets us out to March, the month that Rich is very excited about, that is a little bit more middle of the road. It's a less obvious trend in the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah, you said it, both of you, with these longer days and the higher angle of the sun. I don't know, it's not as impactful, once we get, past the Super Bowl. Once we get into that third week of February, fourth week, and obviously we can get wintry weather well into March, and we all three know that in the Great Lakes. But at least we're getting those longer days and the higher sun angle. There's hope, there's hope.
I love the positivity. Absolutely. There
Rich
is
is like
hope.
a beam of optimism today.
Yeah, and we're kind of turning the corner as far as like averages bottoming out. So, even an average stretch is actually going to be a warming trend because we start warming up as we turn that corner, getting mid to late January. So hang in there and feed into Rich's enthusiasm. All right, we're just about to wind things down here. We always like to have a little bit of fun at the very end, and I thought we'd just kind of go around the horn. This was actually Emily's idea, and just chat very briefly about what we love about life here in the Great Lakes. I think we've probably hit some highlights already, but your idea, Emily, you lead the charge.
Well, I think the best thing about it is just that it's always changing, especially for those of us that are in the weather world. It keeps us very occupied. But I can really say I have been absolutely loving winter this year. Yes, we've had a couple milder weeks, but when we were really going at the beginning of December, there was just, it was so beautiful. It was cold. But it was very, very pretty. And I can say that this is the first winter that I've really, really enjoyed in a long time. So I'm almost not ready to let go of it. But, my favorite thing about the Great Lakes is just that we do have all of the seasons. I think it makes us more appreciative of when we do have these cold snaps and, when things warm up. I mean, today, earlier this week, of course, we were seeing temperatures in the 40s, the 50s. And, you soak it in a little bit more. You appreciate it a little bit more after you've kind of been through the ringer a little bit.
There you go. Do you have like a go-to spot on a cold Chicago day to warm up? Like maybe a good soup joint, chili joint, something like that?
I love, I'm becoming a big foodie. I can say I didn't used to be a big foodie, but I'm becoming one living here. So really any kind of restaurant that has like warm comfort food, like I want to feel like I'm at my mom's. So there's several that come to mind, but yeah, I just like comfort food and getting nice and warm and toasty.
It's always a good idea. All right, what's the top of the charts over there in Detroit for winter life in the Great Lakes, Rich?
It's the water, it's the scenery. Obviously, in the summertime, you get the green and you get the 80 degrees and it's beautiful. But Emily knows because she's from these parts, the St. Clair River and the Detroit River and the parks that are up in the thumb of Michigan and the Lake Michigan parks. Even though it's winter, it's harsh. It's not summer. It's not July, but still, beauty is out there.
So pretty.
And I've over the years traveled to Niagara Falls a few times in the winter season, and it is a sight to behold. I recommend it. It's not just a summer thing, Niagara Falls.
All right. Best spot to warm up in Detroit in the winter?
Well, we all have our favorite local conies. That's like the little joint that has soup and hot dogs and chili and salad. So I have a local favorite coney where the food is always hot. The soup is always hot. The omelets are always hot, and hot food in wintertime.
Yes. And the chili that's on the conies. Rich, you're speaking my language. I was just back in Michigan a few weeks ago. And, just in the last 2 minutes, you've mentioned like exactly everything that I did when I was in Michigan. I went and walked along the St. Clair River, was a little disappointed that I didn't see more ice. But then I took my family out for Coney dogs that night. And I was like, I'm going to take you guys out for a real nice dinner. We went to Coney Island for
Love
$2 or
that.
$3 hot dogs. I mean, it's just the best. It's the best.
There you go. All right, I love it. So for those who aren't familiar with a coney, it is like a Coney Island hot dog?
It's like a Greek
Yes.
/ hot dog place. So they have some
okay.
Greek stuff and they have hot dogs and soup. Everybody here in Southeast Michigan has their favorite coney. And when you come, Rob, we'll take you out. Emily and I will take you out to our favorite conies.
That sounds awesome for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I got to agree with Rich as far as the water goes. Definitely one of the best parts of living in the Great Lakes. Even when it is ice, there's still the beauty of it. Like you were saying, Emily, it's been a gorgeous winter. At times, we've just had spectacular scenes, places to go that you can visit and just look and just wonder, and be amazed at the wonder of winter. As far as my warm-up spot, well, if chili is your thing, Milwaukee has a place called Real Chili, and it is one of the best bowls of chili you're ever going to have. You got to check that out. And if you guys come visit here in Milwaukee and we have time to go out for breakfast, I'm going to take you to my favorite breakfast spot called Augie's. It's in the Hotel Metro, which is kind of a throwback retro hotel with the old, the conversation chairs and the old kind of retro mid-century modern look, but they make the best breakfast potatoes I have ever had. I think the key ingredient is paprika, but I've tried it at home and I can't do it, so I'll just keep going to Augie's. It'll be fine.
Count me in.
All right, it sounds great. Thank you so much again.
Yeah,
I appreciate both of you and your time. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Isobar, the highs and lows of meteorology.